To the John Fetterman saga. Take a listen.
We all have to make sure that everyone that works is able to, that's the most American bargain, that if you work full time, you should be able to live in dignity as well. True. That's what I believe. I don't ever recall in the Statue of Liberty did they say, take our tired huddle masses and put them on a bus. There, everybody in Braddock, an overwhelmingly majority community of black community, all understood what happened. They understood what happened.
Okay, those were just some, and we can't, he only had to speak for 20 minutes in an hour, so we can't play all the 20 minutes. So that's just some of John Fetterman on Tuesday night. He's running for the Senate in Pennsylvania. He struggled to form basic sentences on Tuesday night against Dr. Oz, but Fetterman claims that he is fit to serve the people of Pennsylvania in the United States Senate. Joining us now for more, cardiologist and someone who knows a thing or two about strokes and stroke recovery, Dr. Evan Levine, with us this morning. Doctor, great to have you on.
Thank you.
So John Fetterman had a stroke 4 days before the primary in May, and the message from his camp has been that basically nothing to see here. He's fine for the last 5 months. But after what we saw Tuesday night, clearly he's not. What's he up against right now as he tries to recover from this stroke?
Well, there's two things I'd like to talk about. Number one, I haven't examined Mr. Fetterman, and these other physicians have not.
Yep.
So it's really difficult to comment about his cognitive ability. We can comment that it seems that when he had the stroke, he developed something called an expressive aphasia. So he has difficulty getting the words out, but he may not have any problems with his cognitive ability. When he spoke about the elephant in the room, he spoke about this, but I just want to say something. Every physician watching that show, the debate, who read about what occurred, will tell you there was a bigger elephant in that room. Mr. Fetterman showed terrible judgment in 2017. His own cardiologist wrote a statement saying that he saw Mr. Fetterman 5 years ago with heart failure. He came in with too much fluid in his body and diagnosed him with heart failure and atrial fibrillation. Now, I can tell you, most cardiologists, almost every physician would have told him, hey, you have a significant risk of death or a stroke. And yet his own cardiologist said he just took off. He never showed up again. He stopped all his medications. So the big elephant in the room for me was, where's the judgment here? He coughs it up to say, oh, I was just one of these guys and then ignored that. Well, Dr. Oz and I, we both worked in indigent areas and took care of really tough people, tough guys. And you know what? When I tell people that you're going to have a stroke if you don't take your medication or die, you know what? Most of them, almost everyone, showed up and took their medications. His own doctor, Dr. Chandra, who made that statement, said he'll be fine if, he used the word if in that statement, if he takes his medications. Why is that?
Well,
they
Dr.
think
Levine,
perhaps he's not going to be compliant with his medicine. So for me, I think this man has terrible judgment. I don't want to comment about what occurred during the debate. I don't know him. I didn't examine him. But what was going on in the 5 years? What was the reason why he was in heart failure?
Okay,
why
got it.
Why won't he let us know about that?
So you've got everybody's attention, I must say, in this studio right now. And we know that you haven't treated John Fetterman. But you just, it's one of those situations where you got to believe your lying eyes when you look at what we saw on Tuesday night, because that's all we've got. And this guy's going to be in the Senate for the next 6 years. Here are the facts. He's got a pacemaker. He's 53 years old. He's got an enlarged heart. You just mentioned that. As a result of having an enlarged heart, he's got to travel around with a defibrillator. Does that increase his chances for another stroke?
Well, the increased risk is his terrible compliance. So first of all, he doesn't have a typical pacemaker. He has a defibrillator, which means his heart function is severely weakened. So just like Dr. Chandra said, and he added that, I don't add that to any of my other patients, if they take their medicines, I assume they will. But Dr. Chandra, his own cardiologist, suspects he may not take his medication. And so he added the word, if he takes his medicines, he will be fine. Sure, if he takes his medications, he may be fine. Yeah. But he has demonstrated he is poorly compliant. The other statement I see in Dr. Chandra's note is that he will see him again in 6 months. There's no way Dr. Chandra wrote that without the help maybe of someone in Mr. Fetterman's camp. No one would want to see him in 6 months. He's a poorly compliant patient with heart failure, AFib, a fresh stroke, and a defibrillator. He needs to be seen often, every week or two.
Dr. Levine, if I could hold you just to about a 30-second response at most here. His stroke was on the left side. We know that. And that can affect things like executive function, comprehension, forming sentences. So that can basically masquerade if somebody really does have cognitive setbacks. Those are pretty important things for United States senators. How concerned are you just from a medical perspective?
Again, I have not examined the patient. He is a public official. Perhaps he should have an independent exam to make us feel that we're comfortable, but I can't comment on that because I haven't examined him. He clearly has a difficulty expressing himself. Other than that, no one should be able to comment on whether or not he's fit based on that. I am concerned with his terrible compliance. He stops that blood thinner again, he's going to have another stroke. And he didn't take that blood thinner for 5 years.
Wow.
He was a walking time bomb for 5 years. Never showed up. Imagine everyone out there. What kind of judgment is that?
We'll leave it there. Dr. Levine, thanks so much for joining us this morning and breaking that down. It's a complicated issue. Appreciate your insight. Thank you.